Alright. You want me to go in this game? We won this game. We finna get some interactions and shit. Or at least attempt.
Copies in the entire world, but somehow one had just been put up for sale. The listing priced the card at 400,000 yen, or about $3,570. For a card this rare, the price didn't seem unusual.
These blocks so big, sitting on them by yourself looks stupid.
The buyer was a woman we'll call Yumi, who was in her early 20s and was living in Kyoto, Japan. Like many other collectors, Yumi regularly browsed auction sites hoping to find rare cards. So when a listing for Lorelei the Symphonic Arsenal appeared, she paid in full, thinking that she just secured one of the rarest cards in existence. However, that joy only lasted until the card arrived. As she examined the card right after receiving it, one detail stood out, and that was that the background of the illustration looked much more colorful than it should have been, and she'd seen enough reference photos to know exactly what that meant. The card was a fake, but instead of confronting the seller, Yumi went straight to the police with it. She reported the purchase to the Kyoto Prefectural Police, and told them that she just paid 400,000 yen for what she believed was a fake. Now officers soon began investigating the complaint. They came to the auction listing and let the sale, comparing the cards to images of authentic copies of Lorelei. And at that point, there was still a doubt left that there was something strange going on, because the card wasn't just slightly different or poorly printed. It was a counterfeit. And as a result, police then turned their focus to the seller, and according to the information attached to that listing, it had been posted by Shunki Iwasaki, a 29-year-old man living in Setagaya Ward, Tokyo. On October 23rd, 2018, about 8 months after the listing first appeared, officers then arrested Shunki on suspicion of illegally copying a company's product. The fake card still carried the name and logo of Konami, the business that owned the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, which meant that he just landed himself in big trouble with a large corporation. Now during questioning, Shunki admitted that he'd sold the card and acknowledged that it was fake, but chose to sell it anyway to make some money. However, he insisted that he was not the person who created it. Now because of that claim, police were left with one more mystery to solve. Where did the fake actually come from? Unfortunately, based on the information that was made public, the identity of the person behind the fake card was never revealed. However, while Shunki confessed to knowingly selling the fake card, there's no record showing whether he was convicted or punished for his crimes. And while this case cost one collector $3,570, the next one received more disturbing for a completely different reason. Because this time, the person at the center of the controversy wasn't some random seller online. He was one of the most respected players in the entire game.
Looks like it's a bad time to be a shooter in the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game, because apparently it doesn't matter what your accomplishments are or who you might be, you can get absolutely wrecked.
Ryosuke Sugimura, better known in the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh scene by his nickname Hitsuji, was a Japanese Yu-Gi-Oh player in his early 20s, who became internationally famous after winning the 2017 World Championship. But about a year later, footage from one of his matches began circulating online, and what viewers noticed would become a scandal that would completely divide the Yu-Gi-Oh community. Before that moment, Ryosuke had already spent years putting a reputation inside Japan's professional Yu-Gi-Oh playing circuit. Like many other players in the community, he competed under a nickname rather than his real name. And over time, Hitsuji, which means sheep in Japanese, became recognized among top-tier players for his ability to play some of the most difficult decks in the game. Throughout the mid-2010s, he regularly competed in regional tournaments, shop championships, and national qualifiers across the country. And in August 2017, he would go on to win the Yu-Gi-Oh World Championship, after qualifying for the Japan National Championship in Tokyo the month before. Now when Ryosuke stepped onto the stage at that World Championship, he came equipped with a strategy that was already dominating the competitive scene, using a deck known as Dinosaur Yangzing. This strategy first appeared in April of 2017, when new cards were released in booster packs that allowed players to create stronger decks. To explain it simply, Dino Yangzing combined three groups of cards. These were dinosaur monsters that acted as the main attackers, Yangzing cards that were support cards, and the powerful boss monsters known as True Kings. When these cards worked together correctly, they could shut down almost everything your opponent tried to do. Think of it like showing up to a fistfight and your opponent just brought a tank. You could technically still win, but your odds wouldn't be great. Now because of how dominant this deck became, bootmakers eventually stepped in, and in October 2017, the deck was actually banned. No one could ever use that strategy again, not even Ryosuke. But following the ban, he had to build a new deck from scratch, one that could replace the strategy that had carried him to the top. And more than a year later, after his championship win on November 23rd, 2018, he participated in the largest independent Yu-Gi-Oh tournament in Japan, the Handy Grand Championship. As the reigning world champion, the crowd expected Ryosuke to dominate, and after being matched up with a player named Uchi, Ryosuke barely hesitated between plays and moved through the match seamlessly. However, it wasn't until a Twitter user posted the footage of the match that people began to understand why it had looked so easy. Ex-user Pepe Adon ran an account that mainly focused on reviewing match footage, and after coming across the recorded Hitsuji vs Uchi game, Pepe Adon began carefully watching the match frame by frame, and the more the footage was reviewed, the more Ryosuke's plays began to look suspicious. In the video, Ryosuke could be seen making unusual deck movements while shuffling and cutting. At certain moments, he appeared to manipulate the deck in a way that allowed him to track a specific location of certain cards. Now, it's unknown whether or not Uchi realized what was happening during the match itself, but once the footage was examined online, many players in the community concluded that he'd been cheating. On November 26, 2018, 3 days after the match, Pepe Adon posted the footage publicly, and within hours, the video began spreading everywhere, and discussions erupted across forums and social media, all debating whether the actions were intentional cheating or simply careless play. Now, the pressure eventually reached Ryosuke himself, and he responded to the accusations by posting a statement online. The same day, the video went viral, saying, "Although it's true that the video shows me not doing a deck cut, I didn't deliberately change the top card on the deck." Now, soon afterwards, the tournament organizers got involved and started their own investigation into the match. And the very next day, on November 27, 2018, the Hardy Grand Championship organizers announced their decision on their blog. Ryosuke was indefinitely banned from the event and all tournaments associated with it. For a player who had once stood at the very top with the dominating deck of the time, the punishment was devastating. The following day, November 28th, he posted on Twitter stating, "Regardless of the results of the investigation into my illegal play, I apologize for causing inconvenience to the Hardy Championship organizers and to my opponent Uchi." In the end, the community got a ban and an apology, but never an explanation. Ryosuke had already reached the top of the game, and no one ever found out why he felt he needed to cheat to stay there. In this next case, however, there was no need for slow motion replay, because everyone could see exactly what happened.
Reluctantly admitted to be using less than 45 minutes before his little outburst. Because of course, the perfect time to do is right between rounds of a Yu-Gi-Oh! Locals.
It was the evening of July 9, 2024, in Marshfield, Missouri, when a Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament was in motion. Inside a local card shop, players carefully shuffled decks and slid sleeves against each other as competitors prepared for the next draw. Some players were calculating their next move, while others watched nearby, waiting for their turn. But before the night was over, things would escalate at one of those tables, in a way that no one in the room was expecting. One of the players sitting in that room that night was 26-year-old Haven Burkhardt from nearby Springfield, and he was playing against Jordan, who'd come to the store to play for fun like everyone else. Haven was having a great time, until he found himself in a losing position, and instead of quickly playing out his turns, he started moving through the game extremely slowly, as the clock continued counting down. Now, Jordan eventually noticed what was happening. Haven was doing this to stall, and he wasn't having it. According to a witness, Jordan leaned over and said, "Hey, could you please play faster, since it is almost time in the round?" But unfortunately, Jordan's strawman changed the mood at the table. Haven said, "Nah, you can shut up though." Jordan responded, "Well, you are slow playing." And within seconds, Haven was already making threats towards Jordan. "Well, how about I punch your teeth in instead?" Now, as nearby players started to notice, a few tried stepping in to calm the situation down. Jordan, now feeling threatened, called 911, and other players began calling out for the head judge to come over. And while all of this unfolded, Haven got up and walked over to the front counter where Victoria, the staff member running the register, was standing. He turned in the playmat he borrowed and demanded, "Give me my prize pack now." Victoria, unaware of what just happened at the table, calmly replied, "Well, I'm about to do prizes here in a moment." By then, Jason, the store owner, had already been informed and came over to figure out what happened. He told Haven, "Listen, you're hereby banned from the store, our second store location, and I never want to see you step foot in here again." Now, Haven demanded his prize pack anyway, but Jason told him that he wasn't getting it. And that was when Haven put his hands on Jason, in an attempt to push him aside and reach for the prize sitting nearby, which he realized was a huge mistake. Because before owning the card shop, Jason had served in the military, and the moment Haven put his hands on him, Jason grabbed him and warned, "You need to leave now, before this gets worse." But Haven didn't stop, and the two struggled until Jason finally had enough, and picked him up off the ground and slammed him onto the floor. Haven looked up and said, "Oh, you just assaulted me," and then stood up and raised his fist like he was about to swing. He never got the chance though, because at that exact moment, 3 police officers walked through the door, and in an instant, he was tackled to the floor and taken out in handcuffs. Now, as they escorted him out the store and toward their vehicle, it seemed like the situation was finally over. But then something caught their attention. Nearby, they located Haven's car, and inside was another man who'd apparently been there the entire time. And curious, the deputies approached to figure out who this person was, and why he was waiting there during the incident. Now, Will called the man in the car Peter, since his identity was never made public. But when officers ran his information through their system, they discovered that he wasn't just a bystander. He had active warrants out of Greene County for failing to appear in court on a charge related to tampering with a motor vehicle. And Because of this, Peter was placed under arrest as well. Now to make this even worse, after a thorough search of Haven's car, they found drug equipment inside, and that's when Haven admitted that he'd used heroin 30 to 45 minutes earlier and thought he might be overdosing. So emergency medical services were called as well to evaluate him before he could be taken in. Now after searching the car, deputies also searched Haven himself, and inside his wallet, they found a small bag of cocaine that weighed around 0.14 ounces, or 4 grams. And so by the end of the night, he was facing multiple criminal charges, including assault and drug possession. He was then booked into Webster County Jail and held on a $50,000 bond. Now at the time the incident was reported, Haven was scheduled to appear in court on July 23rd, but little information had been publicly released about what happened afterward. The chaos in this story started and ended in one night in a card shop with people who could see exactly what was going on. The next case, however, played out entirely online and began with a photo of something that people thought never existed.
And as the story made its way to Reddit, Facebook, and eventually YouTube, the public narrative of this car took life on its own.
On December 22nd, 2020, at exactly 9:35 in the morning, a user named Green messaged in a Discord server called r/u, a place where collectors bought and sold cars. He asked a simple question: can I get a price check on these parallel rares from MF03? At first, nothing about the message stood out. That changed the moment though he shared a photo. The cards looked different from anything most players were used to see. They had a metallic sheen that reflected light in a way that looked unusual. MF03 was the third set of promotional cards produced through a partnership between Konami, the Japanese company behind the game, and Mattel, one of the biggest toy manufacturers in the world. In the early 2000s, the two companies worked together to produce Metal GX action figures, a line of Yu-Gi-Oh toys. Each came with a promotional card packed inside the box, and the image we'd sent showed 6 of these cards, including Elemental Hero Avian, Crusadertrix, Clayman, Sparkman, Bubbleman, and Cyberdragon. The toy line had been poorly distributed, and some products were quietly cancelled before they ever reached stores. Now for years, cards like these had existed more as rumors than confirmed pieces of the game's history, and everything the community knew about them came from scattered forum posts and old box photos. No one had ever actually seen them, and yet here they were. Green explained that he'd been given the cards as a gift and placed them in a childhood binder, stating that it was something that had been sitting untouched since he was a child. Now people immediately questioned whether the cards were even real. One even pointed out small inconsistencies like the numbering on Cyberdragon that had EN009 instead of EN010. Others focused on the fact that some of the cards had never been publicly documented before. However, at the time, other people were also excited, because if the cards were actually real, this was not just a rare find. It was a lost piece of the game's history, the kind collectors had been chasing for years. Now on January 6, 2021, almost a month after we'd sent the photos, he submitted several of the cards to PSA, which stands for Professional Sports Authenticator. They examined cards and scored them on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 meant the card was in perfect condition, and 1 if it was heavily damaged. Now when the results came back, Clayman received a 3, meaning it was in rough shape. Avian scored an 8, which put it in a pretty good condition, and Cyberdragon received a 6, as it had some visual flaws, but was still in decent shape.
And it passed the smell test. There weren't any glaring issues, the parallel foiling, card text, there was nothing off with the card. If it was a fake, it was one of the most convincing anyone had ever seen.
Now soon after, Weed started planning an auction, and to handle the process, he worked with Dan Parker, who was the owner of YGO Organization and Yugipedia, two major community-driven platforms dedicated to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. Together, they created a dedicated Discord server designed specifically for selling these cards, and it was complete with channels for bids, questions, and buyer verification. Weed posted on Facebook to advertise the cards, and that's how people found out his real name, Kevin Lee. And to join the auction, you would just need to prove that you had the money to purchase it. Dan posted the details on TCG Player, an online marketplace for trading cards, stating, applications will be temporarily granted access to a vetting user group, giving them access to a channel only them and the auction staff can see, where they can prove who they are, where they are, and the funds with which they're making their bids. Now the auction officially began on January 15, 2021, 9 days after the cards were sent for grading, at 4:15 p.m. Bidding on the first card, Clayman, reached the thousands. The collectors were competing for the item that many believed might never appear again.
$500. The bids kept climbing. 1,000, 1,200, 1,300, 1,600, 2,100, all the way up to $2,500. Then the deleted user made the biggest jump yet with a $3,000 bid. Freedom07 fired back immediately with $4,000. The bidding wars showed no signs of slowing down. $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. The numbers kept soaring until Freedom07 pushed the bid all the way up to the magic $10,000 mark. This number seemed to silence the competition, washing out the lesser bids as the clock ticked toward the 30-minute checkpoint. But with just 1 minute to go, 29 minutes into the countdown, that big goldfish swooped in with a last-minute snipe, $10,000
Eventually, it sold for $10,500 to a user named Dead Big Gold Fish, while Avian followed with an intense exchange of back and forth bids that reached $11,000 from a user named Nubs0948.
From 2,000, 3,000 to 5,000 this time, the bids were more spread out apart. The bid of $8.5K, Land in the Shad decides to bow out, leaving three contenders. The bidding moved on, $9,000, $9,100, $9,500, and then Nubs pushed it to the 10K mark. That big old fish tried the same last minute move as before, dropping a $10,500 bid with just 2 minutes to spare. But this time, Nubs was ready. With a quick counter, they bumped it up to $1,100. And just like that, the second card was sold.
Out of all the cards in the set, Cyber Dragon was the one that had never been publicly seen or documented before, and bidding climbed steadily and reached $30,000 when a bidder named Rafa376 placed his offer. But then a bid of $30,500, only $500 above Rafa's offer, would be added by a buyer labeled as deleted user. Now 30 minutes passed with nothing to counter, and the auction
Can't even
closed.
eat these
Cyber
sandwiches,
Dragon
bro.
was sold. Now as the excitement settled, people began revisiting the auction itself, going through screenshots, timestamps,
Yeah,
and
you can't even
messages that
eat
were
the
sent
sandwiches,
during the
bro.
bid.
That's fucked
They
up.
were already skeptical about whether the cards were even real, and the more they investigated, the more the auction itself started to feel off. The deleted user who placed a winning bid of $30,500 on Cyber Dragon started to get attention from the community. What made suspicious was how the verification process worked. To place a bid, every participant had to either provide ID and proof of funds, or be personally vouched by Kevin or Dan. That gave Kevin the ability to let anyone he personally knew into the action, without requiring them to prove that they had the money. Now before the winning bidder's account was deleted, his name was Blue Oreo, and he wasn't actually there to genuinely buy the card. After the auction closed, Kevin went to Dan and admitted something that changed everything. He told Dan that he and Blue Oreo had arranged it from the start. Blue Oreo would enter the auction, drive the price up by bidding against three buyers, and if he ended up winning, they would resell the card together and split whatever profit came from it 50-50, with the original $30,500 going back to Kevin first. But the plan actually fell apart before it even started. Blue Oreo never actually had the $30,500 to begin with. The whole thing depended on the resale working out, and when that didn't, he admitted to Kevin that he had nothing to give him, and that was what forced Kevin to go to Dan and come clean in the first place. Now aware of the scheme, Dan shared this information with a small group of vintage collectors in a private group chat, but it didn't stay private for long. Someone in the group took the information straight to the YGO Drama Center Facebook group, and the entire situation was out in the open. On May 7, 2021, 4 months after the auction, the same Cyber Dragon would be listed on eBay with a starting price of $10,000. And despite the fraud being publicly exposed, the card still attracted bids, but the highest was at $23,600, which was already much lower than the $30,500 from the original Discord auction. Even then, the situation didn't resolve, as that buyer never paid either. And just when people thought that this was the last time the card would be seen, they would be proven wrong in 2024. 3 years later, when it was listed on an online marketplace for collectibles called Rare Candy, with an asking price of $150,000. Now around that time, Dan had been receiving messages from employees at PSA, BGS, and CGC, three of the biggest card grading companies in the world, all asking about the card. One of those employees from CGC, who we will call David, ended up flying out to see Kevin personally to inspect it. And after confirming it was real, David actually bought the card, with the final sale price being kept private. Now whether Kevin has ever faced any real consequences for what he did was never made public. His scheme had played out behind the screens and usernames, and the community never got a proper resolution. The next case was something far more personal, and it happened to women who were just trying to play the game.
I can go into a shop and it gets quiet and stares at me, or I can go to a shop and then I get hit on.
It is fair to see women participating in trading card games, even though in the wider gaming world, women make up nearly half of all players. But in trading card games like Yu-Gi-Oh, the numbers are much lower. At big tournaments, women often make up only a small group, sometimes only about 5% or even less. This can mean walking into a room of 100 players and seeing only a handful of women. And for a long time, most people didn't question why that was, until people started sharing what was really going on behind the scenes. And by 2016, enough of these experiences had been shared privately that someone within the community decided to bring them into the public eye. A YouTube channel known as House of Champs released a video titled Why More Women Don't Play Yu-Gi-Oh! Harassment in the Online Community, showcasing a compilation of screenshots, messages, and personal accounts from 7 women throughout their experiences within the game's players. One of them was solely designated public trade polls and removed their pages, where players would discuss and trade Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. At first, it looked like a normal post, until a user commented, "Only if it comes with your nudes." While Saori's experience came from a single public comment, for others, these interactions didn't stay in one place. They moved into private messages. Ellen Thomas was a playmat designer who shared her work and collection online. At one point, she received a message from someone she wasn't even connected with saying,
"Hey, can I see your playmat collection?"
Now she didn't respond for days. Then, nearly 2 weeks later, another message from the same person.
Answer.
There was no other message in between these two messages, yet the tone had changed completely. And in other cases, messages like these come across as something that almost sounded sincere. Like what happened to Flossie. Her situation didn't stop with insults or threats. It started with a message from a total stranger saying,
"I love you. What do I do?"
She responded,
"Oh my, I'm not sure what can be done about that."
Now days passed, and then he came back with,
"Marry me. I never asked for anything. Please."
She simply replied with,
"It's okay. How are you anyway?"
That was enough to make him start messaging more. He apologized first.
"Sorry for the delay. My internet is very bad this time.
Then came the real message.
I'm a big fan of you, and recently I am deeply in love with you. I can say I feel great, but at the same time, the fact of you being so far hurts me. I really fell in love with you."
And he followed it up with this.
"Sorry for the terrible English. I'm from Brazil. I'm really studying your language to understand you and be fluent. I know this is very sudden, but if you say that I have any chance, I would be able to cross the continent for you, to show you at least for a moment how much I love you. I hope I have not scared you. I am not a pervert."
But Flossie wasn't the only one who had to endure this kind of harassment, just for being part of the community. Jackie Bernal was a Yu-Gi-Oh content creator who ran a YouTube channel, first under the name Mecha Jayun, from 2013 to 2017, now known as Mariamne, where she posted videos related to the game. But the more people knew who she was, whether through her videos or at real-life events, the more unwanted messages she received. One read like someone shouting through the screen,
"Hi, I married you in my dream once. It was the bestest dream ever. One day you're gonna marry me in real life, and we're gonna have a bunch of dueling babies."
Another message started off sounding like a fan,
"Hey Mecha Jayun, wow, I see your videos on YouTube. They're great.
but within a few lines it suddenly changed.
And you know what I love? You. I want to be your t-shirt when it's wet. I want to be the shower when you sweat. But more than anything, I swear, I want to be your underwear.
Then it turned into something longer.
What I want more than anything is to hold you in my arms and tell you just how much I love you and how much I want you in my life.
Before ending with,
I love you, Mecha Jayun. Marry me, please."
some messages didn't even try to hide their intentions, and just skipped straight to their demands.
So I've seen some of your videos online, and I know this is kind of forward, and you probably wouldn't do something like this, but you should totally send me a pic of your glorious.
And then 3 months later, the same person came back with just,
Show me them.
what made it worse was that it didn't end online. One comment on one of the YouTube videos referenced seeing her at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series event, and described in graphic detail what they wanted to do to her.
You're so hot. I saw you in YCS Tacoma, and I had to go to the bathroom and clean mine. I wanted you to choke on mine.
Those were only a few of the women mentioned in the House of Champs video, and the issue did not end there. On July 1st, 2018, about 2 years after the video was released, the issue reached a wider audience, when YG Organization posted an article about it. Instead of focusing on a single story, the article put together multiple accounts that showed how varied and serious these experiences could be. In one case, an unnamed player was suspended after making extreme threats to her. In one interview, a new player explained how what started as a simple question about upcoming cards turned into someone asking her to trade personal photos in exchange for information about cards that had not been officially released yet, even after she tried to explain that she was in a relationship. She received a message from this person that read,
"He won't find out. It's only from my eyes."
as the article spread, discussions appeared on platforms like Reddit. On April 8, 2022, a post from YGO Anon on X talked about her first local tournament where, after already feeling out of place, she noticed something that made her leave the event entirely.
A woman's first local. I walked around a bit, getting weird looks. Eventually sat down to see a picture of my underwear on a guy's photo. He was showing his friends. Told manager. He didn't care. Left and never went back. Don't tell me misogyny is rampant in the community.
Then on October 26, 2025, another player under the username Iguabel1 shared her experience in a thread that showed how these moments can build over time instead of happening all at once.
This isn't meant to generalize men. It's to highlight that Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't as innocent of a place as some might think. I was very loudly told at a locals that my distracted my opponents, and that was the only reason they lost. I was wearing a Yu-Gi-Oh! T-shirt. The person sitting next to me at an event touched my inner thigh and played it off as a mistake. A stranger tried to talk to me at an event and wouldn't respect that I was heading to the bathroom. They waited for me outside. We did not have a conversation. There was absolutely no need for them to do that.
And then she said something that was hard to read.
I've cried in the bathroom at events because people have made me feel so unsafe and uncomfortable.
But despite everything, she said this.
I love Yu-Gi-Oh! I love the game. I love the people that I've met through it. I don't love that some bad acts have made me feel like I shouldn't go to in-person events. That being said, I'll still go to events, but only if my friends are there. Dealing with this alone is honestly really scary.
Now, at the same time, Konami had already introduced a code of conduct that clearly stated that these kinds of actions could lead to suspensions or removal from organized play. But that didn't change any even inside a company that was trusted to run the gang's official events. Keiichiro Nishira was the CEO and director of DayWo, one of Japan's largest online retail operators. And for years, DayWo operated around 35 stores across Japan, made billions, and helped organize Yu-Gi-Oh! Events. This was exactly why what happened next caught everyone off guard. Beginning in May of 2019, DayWo's records showed full purchases of rare Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. On paper, all these transactions looked real and supported by invoices and receipts. But the problem was that no cards were ever purchased or added to the store's inventory. And in April 2022, DayWo began an internal investigation. And once the review started, the inconsistencies became difficult to ignore. They found out that behind the scenes, Keiichiro had arranged for DayWo's funds to be sent to a male accomplice who would call Taku. And to make it seem as if nothing fishy was going on, Keiichiro used Taku's name to forge a billing statement. And a total of about 180 million yen, or $1.2 million, was transferred from the company to Taku's bank account. Around 95% of it, approximately 160 million yen, or $1 million, returned to Keiichiro's personal account, while the remaining 20 million, or $126,000, was kept by Taku as a fee for his role. Through this process, Keiichiro was able to conceal around 153 million yen, or $965,000, in the business's income, letting DayWo underpaid corporate taxes by 45 million yen, or $284,000. Now investigators found that at least 100 million yen, or $630,000, had been spent on personal expenses, including luxury hotels, expensive wine, overseas travel with women, high-end vehicles, rent, and entertainment. And with this discovery, Keiichiro was of course dismissed from his position, and all ties with the company were cut. Now by December of 2022, 8 months after the scheme was spun out, the Tokyo Regional Taxation Bureau filed criminal charges against Keiichiro and DayWo for violations of the Corporation Tax Act, Japan's law governing how businesses report and pay taxes. Now nearly a year later, on November 19, 2023, officers from the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department arrested Keiichiro at his residence in Koto Ward, Tokyo. This time though, the focus extended beyond tax violations. He was arrested on suspicion of stealing funds from the very business he was supposedly running. And what began as a series of falsified records had now become a full criminal case. And the same day, DayWo posted an apology online.
We sincerely apologize for the great concern and inconvenience this has caused to our customers, business partners, and everyone involved. Our company will continue to fully cooperate with the investigation by the Metropolitan Police Department and the Tokyo District Public Prosecutor's Office. We will continue to further strengthen our internal management system, prevent recurrence, and strive to restore trust.
And yet, even with Keiichiro's arrest, the story did not end feelings, because there had been no widely reported sentence. Now Keiichiro did everything behind paperwork and accounting records, but the next case took that idea even further, and what police found was something that had no business being anywhere near a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card.
The investigation only deepened their suspicions. The detectives are now 100% certain this stream was definitely the source of their drug problem.
In early August 2022, detectives from the Fairfield City Police, based in Western Sydney, received information about a group that might be selling large amounts of illegal drugs in the area. At that point, they didn't know how big the operation might be, or exactly what was going on, but the tip was credible enough that they opened a full investigation. Their attention kept returning to multiple addresses on Arbutus Street in Canley Heights, a suburban area in Western Sydney that is known for its small businesses and residential apartment blocks. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual to anyone passing by, but as the investigation went deeper, they found out that 5 units inside the same apartment block were involved. In a case that size called for more than one team, so they were joined by officers from the New South Wales.
What I'm gonna do it to him, but they ain't gonna give me the option, you know, this time.
Together, they continued working on the case throughout the month. On Tuesday of August 23rd, 2022, the police then made their move. Officers carried out 5 search warrants at the same time, uncovering approximately $2 million in cash spread across the apartments. But it didn't stop there. As they continued searching the units, they found 4.85 pounds of cocaine and 2.2 pounds of methamphetamine, in addition to other illegal and prescription-only drugs that police did not name, estimated at $800,000. Now there was more than just drugs and cash. Officers also seized a prohibited weapon and several stolen IDs. But buried among everything, investigators found something that made them question the whole operation. Inside the units were trading cards, with most of them being Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards and others being Pokemon cards. The whole collection was also estimated to be worth around $50,000. And after the raids, police statements mentioned that officers believed the group had been using the cards as part of a money laundering scheme. During that raid, police arrested 5 people inside the apartment and brought them to Fairfield Police Station. The group included 2 27-year-old men, 1 31-year-old man, and 2 women, aged 26 and 32. None of their names were publicly released though. charge, and the cards were seized. They were charged with offenses ranging from drug supply and possession to dealing with proceeds of crime and participating in a criminal group. Now, after initial reports, the story unfortunately faded. There was no trial coverage and no outcome was ever made public. Now, this bust ended with the person at the center of it wasn't hiding in an apartment. He was competing at the highest level of the game.
Roy St. Clair, aka as I call him, Season Inspect.
He started learning the game during his early era, when most players were still figuring things out. But Roy didn't stay average for long. Within a year, he'd already outpaced every other player in his local scene. By 2004, at 17 years old, he became the #1 ranked Yu-Gi-Oh player in the United States. That year, he also qualified for the World Championship in Los Angeles and placed in the top 8. And from the outside, it looked like the perfect rise of a prodigy. However, something would happen that completely ruined everything he built. During a $10,000 Yu-Gi-Oh event called the Versus TCG tournament in 2004, he found himself deep into the tournament and was making some moves that raised concern among judges. At the start, nothing seemed unusual, as it was common for fellow players to gather around matches to observe while waiting for their own rounds. But Roy wasn't just watching the matches, he was communicating with a nearby player, Alex, who was used like hand movements and gestures. Now, this situation would escalate when Roy would make a direct verbal comment to another nearby player named Paul that was clearly enough for others to hear. Alex made a misplay there. Now, Alex would win his match and secure his place in the tournament. And once the judges started to pay closer attention, Roy's earlier behavior no longer looked incidental. According to Alex's post on a forum site called Hojo, officials stepped in to review what had been going on. And what they found out was that Roy had been signaling with grunts and shaking his head to guide Alex to his match, without his opponent knowing. As a result, Alex's win was overturned. Roy, on the other hand, was disqualified, lost $2,000 in potential prize money, and was given a 90-day suspension that also prevented him from competing at nationals. Despite that, many were surprised to see that didn't slow Roy's career down. In early 2005, a year after he was caught signaling, he returned and reached the quarterfinals of the first Shonen Jump Championship, or SGC, in Columbus, one of the largest Yu-Gi-Oh tournament series in North America at the time, and made a top 8 finish as well. His results spoke for themselves, but so did the questions about whether those victories were earned fairly. And in 2008, while at a regional tournament in College Park, Maryland, he submitted a standard deck list, like any other match he'd been in. But during a random check, officials discovered that Roy was actually playing a completely different set of cards from the one he'd registered. In Yu-Gi-Oh, every player is required to submit a list of the exact cards they plan to use before the tournament begins, and switching to a different deck mid-tournament is strictly forbidden. So that means Roy was able to play cards that his opponents had no way of preparing for, since they could only look up the deck he'd officially registered. And once he was caught, Roy was disqualified and given a ban lasting around 3.5 years. And most people assumed that that would be the end of his career, but it wasn't. That same year, the structure behind competitive Yu-Gi-Oh changed. Upper Deck, the company that had been running organized play in North America, and the one that issued the suspension, was no longer in control. Instead, it was handed over to Konami, which meant the game was now under a new system. And with that change came unexpected news that previous bans didn't fully carry over. And this meant that 22-year-old Roy was no longer restricted from competing. And with the freedom to play once again, Roy plays in the top 4 at US Nationals. He would even compete at the World Championship in Tokyo and finish 3rd. Now, by 2010, 2 years after suspension was cancelled, Roy had fully re-established himself. This time it was with the X-Saber deck. This was a strategy built around a group of creatures called monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! That worked together as a team, with each one supporting the others to quickly overwhelm opponents and remove cards hand in hand. And with this, Roy earned multiple high finishers. A 3rd place finish at SJC Nashville, 2nd place at the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, or YCS in Toronto, and a top 8 finish at the YCS Philadelphia. Across these events, he remained near the top. However, players would already label him as one of the top cheaters within the community. Now, in February 2011, when Roy was 24 now, the tension from his previous cheating incident surfaced again at YCS Dallas in Texas. Here, he finished strong in the top 32 with his X-Saber deck, but during a routine check deck, the staff noticed something small. There were 3 fossil dino cards that had slightly bent corners. In tournaments, cards must not have any visible marks or damage that can tell them apart from the rest, since that would give the player an unfair advantage. Now, the judges initially cleared the cards, saying they were fine. So the tournament continued and Roy's placement stood. It wasn't until after his match that he received the news that he was banned for another 2 years. Konami staff determined that the bent corners were not accidental and that it was done to make them easy for Roy to identify, allowing him to know exactly when they were coming up next. Now, knowing his history, everyone expected expected an apology, or maybe an attempt to distance himself. Instead, he responded with anger though.
But I'm just really sick and tired of Konami trying to straight up just like take great players out of this game.
However, this stance didn't change the ruling, and after finally serving a suspension, Roy returned in 2013 at 26 years old. His first game back was at YCS Austin in February 2013, where he reached the top 16 using a Karakuri deck. Karakuri monsters were machines that automatically shifted position whenever an opponent attacked them, and that shift was what set off a chain of effects that kept building on each other. On top of that, he paired them with a card called Macrocosmos, which removed every card from the game permanently instead of sending them to the discard pile. This meant that his opponents couldn't get back anything that they'd lost, cutting off the strategies that most
Alright,
players
that's
relied on
enough.
to come back into a game. He would also place in the top 32 at YCS Columbus 2 years later in 2015. And just when it seemed like the full picture of who Roy was might finally come into focus, something happened that made it impossible. On May 16, 2017, 14 years after humble beginnings in small local card shops, he actually died at the age of 30 due to breathing problems, bringing an abrupt end to a career that had never followed a straight path. Now the response to his death spread across forums like Mojo and Reddit, where long threads began to fill with players sharing memories that stretched back years, and moments where Roy's understanding of the game was unmatched. Those reflections could not be separated from the other side of the story though, as his cheating incidents were also mentioned in the forums, with comments like,
"There's literally a cheat in Yu-Gi-Oh! Named after him.
he was one of, if not the biggest cheaters in Yu-Gi-Oh! History."
It's not true at all. Roy St. Clair has been banned from competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic, and Pokemon, and is well documented as one of the biggest cheaters of all time. Roy always cheated in everything he played. I have no respect for that too.
While Roy's story was one that the community had years to argue about and eventually mourn, this next case gave no one that kind of time, because somewhere in Tokyo, someone had just walked into a card shop and was about to do the unthinkable.
He said he was debating whether to purchase the card because it was so expensive and stayed in the store for about 50 minutes before he darted out of the store.
On March 13, 2024, at around 4:50 in the afternoon, inside the Fuku Fuku Collection Card Specialty Shop in Akihabara, Tokyo, 22-year-old Sora Takashina stepped inside. He had no stable place to stay and no job, and was doing whatever he could to just get by. In the store, he looked like any other customer though, who was focused on the display cases. But he wasn't there to browse. He had something else in mind. One thing in the shop was worth more than anything else for sale. This item was a Blue Eyes White Dragon card that was displayed behind glass, positioned carefully and with lighting, and valued at approximately 4.98 million yen, or $33,500. This was the card serious collectors traveled to see, and that made it a centerpiece of the shop's reputation. Now Sora walked to the counter and asked to see it up close. In a shop like this, it was standard for buyers to inspect before committing at this price point. So the clerk followed the procedure. He unlocked the case, removed the card, and held it out within Sora's reach. Now Sora looked at the card inches from his hand and made it smooth. Within seconds, the clerk felt the weight of the card in his hand go away, and only saw Sora, who bolted through the store and onto the street. Outside, about 330 feet away from the shop, there was a car waiting. Inside was 22-year-old Kanta-sama, who was already behind the wheel. For a moment, the clerk just stood there, staring at where the card had been, and once the shock cleared, he recorded the incident, and officers from the Tokyo Manseibashi police station started their investigation. Sora and Kanta then moved to another location within a few hours, as they knew that the police would already be looking for them. And later, roughly 3 hours after the theft at around 8 p.m., they arrived at a card resale shop in Keibukuro, where they would sell the same Blue Eyes White Dragon card for 1 million yen, or about $6,400, a fraction of what it was actually worth. What they weren't aware of at the time was that this